Can we hear it?
Oh, yeah, and
I can't either. I don't know what I think. I'm going to start without it. Can you hear it?
I think we should hear it, though, coming up here soon.
because she said we would hear it, right?
Yeah.
Just not see it? Why won't we see it? I don't know, something with the TV. Look, you can see that.
Maybe we don't hear it. Maybe something else is going on weird. Okay, good. Good evening. It is Thursday, April 20th, 2023 at 6 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the land of the Minnewacan Dakota people. Minnewacan means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Our first item on the agenda is our roll call. Dana? Mm-hmm. Come up here.
Eric Tesmer.
Here.
Louise Hines. Here. Katie Schwartz.
Here.
Melinda Doles.
Here.
Simi Petnaik.
Here.
Pat Driscoll.
Here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Miriam Abdullah.
Here.
Shekinah Olakazim. Did I say it right? Close? Okay. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have 3.0, and that is the approval of agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Pat?
It was
Eric?
Oh, with Louise and Eric?
Louise and Eric.
Louise and Eric, okay. It was moved by Eric and
Louise.
and second by Eric. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. The next item on our agenda is 4.0, and that is our student ambassadors being introduced this evening by our superintendent, Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. It is always a fun day, and I feel like, this comes up every month. A little bit different day today. Today was a day that we connected with our student ambassadors virtually. So, of course, we did spend the first 5 to 7 minutes with cameras upside down, rechanging names, right, and making sure we had the right name in the school. But, 5 minutes into it, we were all set to roll with our regular meeting. And so it continues to be fun to be able to connect even with students virtually. I think it's a good lesson for all of us, and it's a good reminder of what it's like to connect virtually. This evening, we're actually going to have Shekinah start for us, and she is an elementary student. I'm not going to give away everything about her, but I will have you go ahead and start. She's going to start by telling all of you a little bit about herself.
Hi, I'm Shekinah Olakazim. I go to Pavement Elementary, and my teacher is Miss Emery. My favorite class is PE, and before school activity I do is choir.
And so what is your favorite I just have to ask this question, board, I'm sorry, but what is your favorite game or activity in physical education class?
I usually like it when we do hockey or basketball.
Those were really fun things for me to teach. The next question, can you talk with the board or share with the board what's happening at your school? You have a student ambassador group at your school. What are some of the things that you're talking about?
One thing that's going on in our student ambassador groups, some things we have done is Black History Month, where people go to guess who a person who helped Black people in the past was. Another thing is Spirit Week. One of my favorite days is Pajama Day.
Yes, we had this conversation, Pajama Day. Every staff member's favorite day is Pajama Day, but it is hers as well. The next question, what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership means to me that like when you can use your voice to help others and be a good influence and get others to find their own way and start something.
And so if those words resonated with you when we were talking about the student experience, I think you remember I came back and this was an example I shared, but I think it was interesting in students' words when you can use your voice to help others. And so that is a great definition of leadership. The next question, our district ambassador group, you have come to 6 meetings, I think, already. What have we worked on with our district ambassadors that really kind of has stuck with you?
Something we worked on is some ways to change the world and helping students better understand some of the words and making suggestions about what we could change to it.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember what we talked about today in your small groups? What did you work on today?
We worked on technology.
I helped just a little bit, but they had conversations about how you use technology in your classrooms and how you prefer to learn. Was there anything that you remember about your conversation today that you would want to share with the board?
Technology can be useful in way to help people and to like help people understand it better. Mm-hmm.
The kids talked a lot about how they mostly saw their teachers using technology as it relates to using the smart boards and having that interaction. And then finally, what do you enjoy most about being a district ambassador? Whether it's be getting online virtually with your friends, I call them all your friends now, or if it's coming here in the boardroom. What do you enjoy most about being a district ambassador?
It's probably getting to come in the boardroom and speak and help out and by saying what I could do or how ways we could help.
Mm-hmm. And Shekinah is just another wonderful example of one of our elementary ambassadors. And there is also a lot of other work that our student ambassadors doing back in their schools, but that was just to highlight a little bit about what's happening at school as well as here at the district level. Now I'm going to turn it over, and a little bit more independent. They kind of know the routine. Miriam is going to talk a little bit, and I'm not going to even help with introductions. We're going to give her a little chance to use the microphone now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariam Abdullah. I'm a junior at Eastridge High School. I'm Egyptian. I was born and raised in Egypt, and then I moved here when I was 5. I'm a PSEO student, so I take full-time courses with a community college, and then I take 1 high school course. I wish to be a pediatrician when I grow up. That's kind of the career plan. And then some of my hobbies include volleyball, crocheting, reading. It's like a variety of different things. And then when it comes to being a student ambassador at school, for me, I started a women's society, sort of, at my school called We Women Belong. So it's just basically a club for anyone who identifies as a woman to come in, and we talk about kind of just ways of empowering women within that high school environment, since it can sometimes be a little tough. Currently, we are working on having product drive. So we sent out an announcement this morning, and then we're working with a nonprofit organization to keep half of the proceeds at Eastridge and then the other half to give to the nonprofit, because my team and I are very aware that menstruation products can sometimes be expensive and all women should have access to them. And then I am part of many other clubs such as NHS, Key Club, HOSA, a lot of other things. And then when it comes to the District Youth Ambassadors Committee, I think I was so honored to be one of the faculty members at my high school asked me if I would like to join, and I thought it would be amazing. I think this is such a great opportunity to be able to kind of voice what the majority of my school, on behalf of my school, what we want to see. And I think it's very nice that they bring in all ages, because often there'll be a lot of times where I'll see faculty members talking to other faculty members about what do you think the students would want, instead of asking the students directly. And so I think it's very nice that we get to voice our opinion. And I also loved that the first meeting I came to, in-person meeting, I walked in and it's just a diverse, it's so many different kinds of students and all different cultures and everything, and I love to see that. And I think it's such a great opportunity for me to gain leadership skills and use a lot of what I learned in here, not just to like better my education and like the school itself, but like kind of better my community and take what I've learned and use that for like the rest of my life almost, because it's very valuable, and I think it applies to almost everything. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is powerful because one of the things our students talked about last time that they could see in terms of teaching was students teaching students. And we know how powerful that can be. And that was one of the ideas that came up in light of many of our younger students, our elementary students, who really look up to our middle level and our high school students. So thank you to Miriam and Shekinah for joining us this evening. I know we have one that has to get off to practice, but we are glad that you could be here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. I think this is on. Okay, back on. All right. Next is 5.0, district highlights, and that will be introduced this evening by our Executive Director of Finance and Human Resources, Dan Pyan.
That's okay. I won't take human resources.
Operation, you said human resources. It's operations.
Oh,
Or operations.
you can be whatever you want.
Really? Good evening, Chair Van Leer, Member of the School Board, Superintendent Nielsen, and student member of the school board. Yeah, part of my duties, I have the pleasure of supervising other departments besides finance and payroll, and that's the operations side. And that includes school nutrition, transportation, and facilities. And I am proud of the facility department. I believe we have respectful, hardworking members of the facilities department. And tonight I have the opportunity to spotlight some outstanding work from the facilities department. Kyle Euchre, come on up, Kyle, and Michelle, is our Director of Facilities, and I will turn it over to him to highlight a member of his department.
All right, thanks. I had to make a cheat sheet for my notes tonight. And I know I put a tie on tonight, so some of the folks that I work with all the time didn't recognize me. So, right? I'd like to start by saying I get to work with a lot of fantastic people. We have a great group of people that make our facilities awesome. And we hear it all the time from people that are at tournaments at our facilities, things like that. There's a lot of staff out there that are prideful of their work and take ownership in our buildings, and it shows. I travel around a lot because I have kids in sports, and I see other facilities and how they're maintained. If I'm out at these things, I'm usually, the game's going on, I've usually got my head up looking at things in the building and how they're doing stuff. So, but tonight I want to put the spotlight on someone who absolutely hates the spotlight. She hates public speaking. She hates everything about it. This isn't to torture her. This is to celebrate her and ultimately recognize the hard work of our staff in the buildings. This winter, the district recorded only one slip and fall that required medical attention. I don't need to remind you of the 90 inches of snow that we've had this year and the challenges we've had out in the buildings with all the fun ice and rain and snow and the challenge that Minnesota threw at us this year. With that, our workers' comp company reported that put us in the top 1% of their clients for that stat, for the slip and fall with requiring medical attention. So that's huge. That helps with our work comp insurance rates and stuff like that. It ultimately saves money for the district. So with that, I want to recognize Michelle Smith back there for her dedication to the district, along with all our custodial crew's hard work out in the buildings and their dedication to the district. So, Michelle, thank you, and thanks for keeping an eye on things for us and making it all smooth. See, we didn't even make you stand
Michelle,
up.
are you sure there's nothing you'd like to say?
I would like to thank all the facility staff for all their hard work, battling all the snow and ice, and they are loyal to the district and everybody that they serve.
Thank you. And Michelle is top-notch. Michelle came out of one of our schools and did just an extraordinary job. When she left one of our buildings as the maintenance person and cleaning the school, the custodial person, she was sadly missed, but she sets the bar really high for all of our facilities. So on behalf of the entire district, thank you, Michelle.
Okay, Michelle, great job. Next is on the agenda is 6.0, and that is comments to the board. At this time, individuals may speak to the school board on any item related to South Washington County Schools. The board will not respond to or discuss your comments, character abuse, or specific complaints identifying staff, students, or task force members will not be permitted. The superintendent may be asked to prepare a response to your concerns. Speakers are permitted to speak for up to 3 minutes our speakers tonight for their comments. We welcome you this evening, and your voice is understandably supported, and we look forward to your continued support. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda items. Jimmy?
All consent items are, All consent items are considered routine and non-controversial by the school board and will be approved by a single motion. Prior to this meeting, board members have had the opportunity to review each of these items and could have requested that any item be moved to the action items for individual consideration. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved. Second?
Moved by Melinda, seconded by Pat. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is 8.0, and that is our information items. Tonight is 8.1 is our financial update, and that will be given by our Director of Operations, Dan Pyan.
Good evening again. Chair Van Leer, members of the school board, Superintendent Nielsen, student members of the school board. Tonight I'll be giving our monthly financial update. As I wait for my, is it up? Oh, there it is. Sorry about that. I could give you a quick story, Sharon. So now that it's golf season again, I have a few friends that we meet every Sunday morning to play, and quite early. And wanted to never tell you the story about the one time the guy, Josh, came running up. We teed off at 8 o'clock, and it's about 8:05, and he comes running up to the tee, and in a big rush, and he says, "Why come you're so late, Josh?" And he said, "Well, it's Sunday, so I have to flip a coin to whether I go to church or go golf. Heads, I go to church, and tails, I golf." So, "Well, that doesn't explain why you're so late." And he said, "Well, it took 15 times till it came up tails." I go on Saturday night, so.
Thank you.
Anyway, so our financial update, so once again, it's just like a brief update as we're winding down the school year and the financial year. Just a review as we go back and think about, it's over 2 years ago now, at the January 21st, 2021 school board meeting, the school board approved over $9 million in reductions to the general fund budget. They also approved an increase of about $300,000 to the revenue budget. And they directed administration to seek an increase of about $6.5 million in its operating levy. They approved total adjustments to the 22-23 general fund budget of almost $8 million and approved total adjustments in the 23-24 budget of about $7.8 million. Why am I telling you this? Besides to remind us of how we work around here and what we've done. We put those changes into the 21-22 budget. Right now we're in the 22-23 budget. With those changes, we were able to present a 10.21% fund balance at the end of last year, the 22 year. Probably the highest percentage we've had in the last, I don't know, 9-10 years. As we look forward, as we look in the year we're in now, we did come to you with a revised budget last month. As we look at what's going on in the 22-23 budgets, which we're in right now, we budgeted enrollment of 18,624 students. I use term students, it's actually average daily membership. And as I looked at the numbers as of April 1st, looks like I'm projecting about 18,692 students using a simple survival cohort method. That's an increase of 68 students to the budget, which is not a big increase, but you know, each student gives us about $10,500, and that helps buffer some of the expense increases that were unexpected this year that we had. We know that revenue is affected by the amount of the basic formula, and we know that the largest portion of our revenue is determined by multiplying that formula by the number of students we have. So as we look at enrollment, just as a reminder, 1920 was actually our largest enrollment in the history of the district, 18,754. In the full pandemic school year of 2021, we dropped to 18,502. The drop was about 1.34%, which was less than most metro school district. It results in a drop of about $2.6 million from the previous year. And as we look at, actually, I'm sorry, I have the wrong numbers here. This is the 21-22 enrollment rolls up to 18,558. We're actually in 22-23 right now. So we're not quite back to our highest level. Hopefully that will come in the next year. I'm just going to switch topics a little just as a primer and as a reminder, because it often comes out about where are people spending that money? Why don't you use this money for that? You can just take that money for here and do this with it. I want to remind you of how the revenues work. I basically break down the revenues here between unassigned and reserved. So unassigned revenues may be used for any legal purposes, including transfers to the school nutrition, community services funds if needed. So we'll look at the school nutrition budget next board meeting, and we like to see them have a surplus balance, mainly because by law, if they run out of money, we need to transfer from the general fund. And it's the same for community services. Reserved revenues may be only used for the purposes described in Minnesota statutes. There's a lot of reserve revenues that you might not realize. As the money comes in, it can only be used for purposes described in statute. And I won't go through every purpose, but most of the titles kind of give it away. So there's operating capital, there's staff development, professional development, there's achievement and integration, there's compensatory dollars that come in, there's third-party billing dollars, gifted and talented aids, long-term facility maintenance, which is one of the larger ones we've had lately. Student activities can only be spent a certain way. Capital projects levy may only be spent a certain way. Safe school levy and AT-PPS dollars. Not to mention that the school nutrition revenues are reserved for use only in school nutrition. Community education revenues are reserved for only use in community education. And then we come to, as we talk later on about the long range facility plan, to building bonds. And we just want to keep reminding people that as we go out for elections, bonds are for building, levies are for learning. So an operating levy goes into the general funds, unassigned dollars. The operating levy is based on the number of students you have. Bonds are voted on by the taxpayers to say, yes, you can borrow this amount of money. In turn, we sell bonds to borrow it, and then we have to take those dollars we levy to pay off the bonds. And then the proceeds may only be used for the use intended in the ballot question. And finally, I'll just give you a legislative update of what I know right now, what most people know right now. It's winding down. It's getting close to be done. We know what the large targets are for spending, but we don't know all the details of the bills, and we're still hopeful for a few things. As you might imagine, it's a major funding session. It's a normal funding session, but we can call it major because of the huge surplus. We don't know what the formula numbers are. We're still hopeful for 5% each year increase in the basic formula. We don't know for sure, but we're still hopeful and I think it'll come pretty close to getting 50% of our special education cross-subsidy reimbursed. And in our case, that would be, we have a cross-subsidy of $20 million, which means we would get about $10 million extra in aid, special ed aid. And the cross-subsidy is the amount of money that we spend on special education above what we get in special education aid. There's a few bills of concern. We don't know enough about this bill. enough of the details. We know in general that there's a bill that would have us pay unemployment for all our hourly workers in the summer, mainly paras and bus drivers. Usually our unemployment costs are incurred and paid, and then we levy for the cost. So on our budget, it's a net zero. This bill does not fund, will not allow us to levy for those unemployment costs, and and it doesn't have a funding source attached to it right now. The cost to us would be about $3.5 million a year in paying unemployment to those hourly workers in the summer. Probably the bigger concern on an operational side is it'll be very hard to staff what staffing we do need in the summer, mainly because, I mean, you make the choice, you know, would you rather collect unemployment or would you come and work in the summer? The hours we offer in the summer are usually about half of what they normally work, so they come out even financially. So we're really concerned about how we'll staff. And what do we need to staff? We need to staff ESY, which is a mandated service in special education. We need paras for that. School nutrition has summer feeding sites. It also services the kids club sites and also services targeted services. And so we need staff for that. And then of course we have transportation of the targeted services and any students that do summer school. So that's one thing we're kind of keeping an eye on. I just wanted to get that out there. And then also there's a bill that would classify certain things as terms and conditions of employment, meaning that they need to be negotiated into a contract. And one of them is class sizes. And although we try to keep our class sizes as low as possible, if it's negotiated into the contract, and if we can't maintain those class sizes, then we'd be in violation of the contract and be grievable. So we'll kind of keep an eye on those as we see, and they should be done in a couple of weeks. Well, I guess it's about 3 weeks from now, and we'll know more as we look down the line. But we really don't know what the revenues are yet, but we've got to think that they'll be probably more than we normally get. With that, thank you.
Hey, Dan, I had a question. Oh, sorry. Do you need to talk first?
Oh,
No, it's just information.
Okay. My one question was about the special education cross subsidies. So that would that 50%, potential 50% payment be for the biennium, or would it be like in perpetuity, or do we not know?
I believe, well, at least it would be to make sure that what we have for cross subsidy is cut in half. So it would have to maintain that half.
Like like 5 years from now or whatever as well? Or would it like 5 years from now as well, or would it?
Well, the appropriation's
end in
only
2
for
years?
2 years,
Okay.
so they would have to either renew it or, because it's just like the basic formula. It's in there, but every year they would have to decide to change it. But
Okay.
I don't know enough about that. I don't know about the details of that.
Oh,
bill.
okay, thanks.
anyone else have any questions for Dan? Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Next is 8.2, and that is the long-range facilities planning, and that will be presented by Christine Schaefer, Assistant Superintendent, and Dan Pyan.
Hi.
Good evening, School Board Chair Van Leer, School Board members, Superintendent Nielsen, and our Student Ambassador Miriam. Tonight we will review information related to the long-range facility process. We will review the feedback that we've gotten so far from you, from community members, from parents, from staff, and we are going to share some priorities that have come out of that feedback. So first, before we get started, let's review who we are as a school district. So we are the second largest employer in Washington County. We are the 6th largest school district in the state of Minnesota. We have nearly 4,000 employees. We have approximately 18,700 K through 12 students. And we provide programming for students of all ages, birth, early childhood, K through 12, and adult education. Again, here's our district boundaries. I know you've seen these, but just a quick review. So we go down to Cottage Grove in the south, Great Cloud Island, St. Paul Park, and Newport to the west. And then Woodbury, just up to south of Tamarack, not all the way up to 94, is to the north is our district. And then parts of Afton, Denmark Township to the east. So that is our district. And who are we? With our 18,994 students, as you can see, this is a breakdown. And the important piece to this to know is over the last 20 years, our demographics have changed. And we are seeing larger percentages of students of color. And also our work for the district, we have 6.2% English learners, 18% students who receive special education services, 25.7% free reduced lunch students that receive free reduced lunch meals, and 0.6% of our students are homeless. All right, so just a quick review. This again is our 2022 bond referendum, where we asked for $462 million from our taxpayers, and again, that did fail, and those are the requests that we asked for in our 2022 plan. And our process, I know you've seen this a few times, but just another reminder, we have our leadership team, our steering committee, which is our executive cabinet. We have our task force partners. So all of the parents, community, students, and staff that we are running our information through and gathering input as we go, and you are gonna see much of that input tonight. All right, now I'll turn it over to Dan, who's gonna go through some of our feedback and our guiding change document.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. We want to remind everybody that we do have a long-range facility guiding change document. Sorry about that. This serves to bring clarity to the roles of the school board, governance, and administrative management. We're going to define the current reality, the results where we want to be, and the unacceptable means as we go through the process. The results we're looking for in this plan is to utilize the information from the demographic report and input from the community and staff to create a 5-year facility plan that prioritizes the needs and takes into consideration the current economic conditions. Another result may be that district may need to consider boundary changes and moving students in schools located outside the city where they live. And also we want to be able to create a funding plan to address the cost of the 5-year facility plan, which will include bonding, using lease levies, and long-term facility maintenance revenue. Probably the most important part to me of the guiding change document is the unacceptable means. These are things that we cannot do in putting together this plan. We will not ignore the current economic conditions. We will not ignore input from the community and staff. We will not ignore the results of the community survey or the updated demographic report. We will not bring forth a plan that will close any elementary school. And we will not bring multiple plans forward. I'll just review a little bit about the community survey, which was conducted December 1st through 16th of last year. It was a random sampling of 500 households in South Washington County Schools boundary and is a representative sampling. Some of the takeaways from this survey that was presented to the school board by Peter Leatherman. While the residents don't necessarily blame the school district, the property tax climate is very hostile. A very low level of residents felt informed about the bond referendum, the one in August. And the most common response among the parents that didn't vote were too busy or forgot. And the takeaway we have, the 3 reasons for opposition to the referendum were the pandemic / economy / property taxes, was lack of a compelling need, and was disagreement about the solution being offered. In this survey, we sought to find out what people would support a property tax increase for, as in what kind of projects. The green is obviously support, the red is oppose, and you can see that secured entrances, high school classroom additions, STEM spaces in the high schools, middle school classroom additions, CTE spaces, all ranked very high in the survey as what somebody would pay a property tax increase for. Then as we look at the financial implications, and quite often on bonds, we talk about tax impact, meaning how does this impact the average or median taxpayer? The surveys show that about 54% of those surveyed would support at least $10 a month increase to their taxes to finance this plan. 34% said nothing, they would support nothing, and then 12% were unsure. And then as we asked about boundary changes, how important it is to limit boundary changes. 34% of those responding said it was very important, and 42% said it was somewhat important. So about 76% of those surveyed felt it was on the level of importance. And it should be noted that as we did this survey, it was a representative sampling. About 30% of our residents in this district are parents of children in our schools. Then I'll talk briefly about the demographic study. The demographer came and presented to the school board. It was completed by Hazel Reinhardt. It looked at projections for the next 5 years. 5 years is somewhat safe because all the children in the projections are already born. It focused on fertility rate, cohort survival rate, and housing data. We did find, or Hazel had said, that the fertility rate is decreasing in Minnesota and in the United States. And 2020 saw the lowest birth rate in the United States since 1979. There's a decline in births in Washington County and in Minnesota, and this will result in smaller kindergarten classes in the next several years. And Ms. Reinhardt looked at the housing growth in South Washington County schools, but said the relationship between housing and K-12 enrollment is complex. It's difficult to determine how many students come out of new housing. As a result of the demographic survey, we did come up with some projections on a site-by-site basis, and overall, just a reminder that as we speak right now, we have 4 schools that are over capacity, 2 high schools and 2 elementaries. And based on the demographic study, within 5 years, we will have 7 schools at or over capacity. East Ridge High School, Altman, Pine Hill, Gray Cloud, Bailey Elementary, Liberty Ridge Elementary, and Red Rock Elementary. And of the same group, of the same time span, we will also have 3 others that will be within 5% of their capacity, that being Park High School, Woodbury High School, and Lake Middle School. That'll turn it back over to Christine.
All right, so now let's look at some of the feedback we've gotten so far. So this is from our first community meeting where we had roughly 50 people attend, and we had them, so these are individual responses, these are not percentages, so you can see where they prioritized all of those items. Secured entrances, high school classroom additions were big, middle school classroom additions, also kitchen, cafeteria, restrooms, and then also you see down there 9 people put down land for future use. So that was our first community meeting. And now this is staff feedback. So this feedback was gathered from staff meetings across the district and department level meetings. And again, you can see where they responded. Again, these are responses, not percentages. So secured entrances again, high school classroom additions, middle school, high school STEM space. Also on here, as you can see from staff, elementary classroom additions as well. Kitchen, cafeteria, restrooms, and again, a few people for purchasing land for future use. So that is our staff feedback this far. And so as you recall, at our last board meeting, we had a conversation with all of you on our priorities and our feedback. So we've summarized that for you. And so these are the 2 questions we asked at that board meeting. What would you prioritize in the new long-range facility plan and why? And how would you present these priorities to the community? So now I'm going to show you how we summarized your responses. So when we asked what you would prioritize in the new long-range facility plan and why, You agreed on 3 top priorities: secured entrances in buildings where they're needed, high school additions and middle school additions. And you also discussed the possibility of building a community learning center that would serve the alternative high school students, Next Step in Pathways, and some of our early learning programs. You also discussed giving voters an option to weigh in on additions to elementary schools versus boundary changes to fill open seats in less crowded elementary schools. Also, we had a discussion about prioritizing kitchens, cafeterias, and restrooms in some of the elementary schools. And also, we had a discussion on purchasing land as a means of controlling costs in the future. So then we had a discussion on how would you present these priorities to our community. You discussed possibility of having multiple ballot questions, prioritizing needs in one question, and giving voters an option to vote on additions to elementary schools versus significant boundary changes in another question. The need for detailing the boundary changes if a bond isn't passed, so showing those in advance. And the importance of clearly communicating the consequences if the ballot question fails. All right, I will now hand it over to Dan Hines, who will go through some more details of each priority.
So now we begin assembling the plan. And we've taken the feedback that we've received from all the interested parties and begun to assemble what could be the plan. And we will use the priorities and the feedback that we're gathering to make that plan. Now, as Christine pointed out, it's evident that there's certain things that are rising to the top right away. We also know that based on the feedback that we have financial constraints that we need to be respectful to stay within. And so targeting that, we look at approximately $7 a month for the stuff I'm about to talk about now. First is secure entryways and security revisions to our schools. And these costs are going to be built into each one of the items we're going through. Firstly is middle school additions. These middle school additions are primarily at Oltman Middle School, and then would also consist of secure entryways at Lake Cottage Grove and Woodbury Middle School. High school additions, we know some of our realities are that we are already over capacity at 2 of our 3 high schools, and 1 is very, very close behind. And so this issue is a capacity issue, but this is also a core space issue. So we're talking about kitchens and cafeterias, and we'll go through that itemized in a moment. Now, all the costs we're going to talk about tonight, these are tentative. This is an ongoing process, so these will be fully developed by the time we deliver the final plan, but these are a pretty good approximation of what we anticipate these would cost. So firstly, middle schools. So we would construct new secure entryways that would encompass our administration, our school support in one location. If you visited Oltman Middle School in the past, it would be similar to that. This would be constructed at Cottage Grove Middle, Lake Middle, and Woodbury Middle, because right now those schools have secure vestibules, but you still have to enter the building in order to reach administration within the building. So this would pull administration, the nurse, other folks like that that are regularly being visited by parents and others to the front of the school so that anybody that's visiting the school doesn't necessarily have to enter the school in its entirety. We would construct the previously planned classroom addition at Oltman Middle School. This would take Oltman Middle School to approximately 1,300 students. We would need to expand the cafeteria as part of that too, of which it's already primed for on the front of the building. And this would also create additional STEM and special education spaces at Oltman Middle School as well. Those spaces just become needed as a building grows, so we would need to add those to accommodate that. And then construction needed at Woodbury Middle School. Anyone who's been through a parent drop-off or pickup at Woodbury Middle School knows it is a nightmare. So this would reroute some of the traffic that's there, putting in an additional road so that we could separate our bus traffic from our parent drop-off into 2 discrete spaces. This would also allow us to construct that new secure entryway on the front of Woodbury Middle School and create the space that we would need to accommodate it. We would also convert existing space in the building into a 3rd music room. So currently Woodbury Middle School only has 2 music rooms. Our other middle schools have 3. So this would create that 3rd space at Woodbury Middle School. At the high school level, at Eastridge, this would construct the previously planned classroom addition at Eastridge. This would expand the cafeteria to accommodate the additional students. This would also construct additional career and technical education and STEM space for the building. At Park, we would construct a new kitchen and cafeteria. Currently, the cafeteria and kitchen are already significantly undersized for the students we already have, and they are landlocked. So the really only big option that we have is to construct new and then reuse the existing space for other uses in the building. So it's not becoming wasted space. We would renovate both the career and tech and STEM spaces through the building as well as constructing additional CTE space. And so that would modernize the career and tech space at Park. At Woodbury High School, same story with the kitchen and cafeteria, new construction of those facilities. Again, those are currently landlocked and unable to be expanded. This would also construct a new secure entryway and student support services area at Woodbury Middle School, coalescing all of those services that are currently spread throughout the building into one space. This would renovate and expand the career tech and STEM spaces, adding additional science classrooms, modernizing the career and technical space, which hasn't changed significantly since it was built in the 70s, and then adding additional career and technical space. And then also renovate the media center at Woodbury Middle School, which also hasn't been touched significantly since it was constructed in the mid-70s. And then as a part of this, also to make that secure entryway work, we would re-lay out the parking lot and the roads servicing Woodbury High School. So other priorities to consider. We need feedback to understand where these additional priorities would land in the plan. We know elementary school additions will be a piece of that. Elementary school bathrooms will be a piece of that. We have several elementary schools that have one set of commons bathrooms that serve the entire school. Lake Middle School classroom additions, as we've looked at the projections for Lake Middle School, we know that it's projected to get very close to its capacity, not quite exceed, but we know we're already strained for space at the school today. So this would construct additional classrooms there to accommodate more space to breathe. Transportation and operations. We know as we grow as a district, we also have to bus more students and serve more students operationally. So looking at options to expand that space. Multi-purpose turf. As we add more students to our high schools and we take up more of our green space as we build classroom additions and kitchens and cafeterias, we know that the green space will get used more heavily that we have. And so this would allow for the installation of artificial turf at each high school, one field at each high school, that would be striped in a way that it could be used by multiple sports. This would also allow it to be used during the day for Phy-Ed, and so that the Phy-Ed activities going on in the day wouldn't necessarily impact the athletics in the afternoon, so the fields would stay in good condition. We would purchase land for additional future use. So this is knowing that as land is being developed, we're losing opportunity to use it. And then other things that we're working on that are priorities that we need to understand where they land is space for the alternative high school. Currently the alternative high school is in the district program center. It shares space with several other organizations down there like Early Learning. Space for early learning itself. Again, as we grow K-12, we also are likely to grow in our early learning students. And then space for our transition programs, which is our next step in pathways programs. Currently, those programs are living in rental spaces, one in Cottage Grove and one in Woodbury. So this, if prioritized, would combine those two into one cohesive space that we would own. And this roughly every $25 million, excuse me, is roughly $1 per month. So as we add these things, that's basically how that adds up to the bill. So reminding ourselves of school capacity and what's projected. Starting at the elementary level, we want to acknowledge that we are projecting, even 5 years in the future with the projected growth, to have an excess of elementary school seats. The issue is that the excess seats are concentrated at specific schools and the seats that we're short are concentrated at specific schools. And so we have to make the decision to, what do we prioritize? Do we prioritize constructing those classroom additions and minimizing the boundary changes that would be necessary? Or do we tackle the issue with extensive boundary changes? At the middle school, as I mentioned, we're going to be very close. We are well within any sort of conservative margin of error of either hitting or exceeding capacity at the middle schools. And then at high schools, we are already short on seats, mainly at Eastridge High School, and that is only projected to get worse. So elementary school additions. So as we look at our demographic report and the associated projections, we know that it is projected that Bailey, Gray Cloud, Pine Hill, and Red Rock elementary schools will exceed their current capacity, 2 of which that already are. We also know that at Bailey and Gray Cloud, those schools are unique in that they have a third gym space, but that third gym space is also the cafeteria. So as those become more crowded, that space is basically exclusively used as a cafeteria. Now that works fine in a school that has 500 students. It becomes extremely difficult to operate a school with over 700 students because you begin adding third and more Phy-Ed teachers with no spaces to teach. And so that's why we can survive like that at schools like Hillside and Crestview and Royal Oaks, because we there too only have 2 gym spaces and a cafeteria, but the student volume is just so much lower. So this would construct an additional cafeteria and kitchen at Bailey and Gray Cloud, allowing for the current third gym space that's being used as a cafeteria to be a third gym space. And then the cafeteria, or the kitchen space, excuse me, would be taken over for other uses in the building. So a little bit in the weeds, but just walking through why that's on there. And so without the construction of this, we know we have the seats again, but boundary changes would be extensive at the elementary school level to move students into the schools that are less populated. Other priorities, transportation facility, as I mentioned. We know more kids equals more buses, and we are already maxed out on space at our transportation facility. We joke that next they're gonna have to park buses on top of each other. So this would purchase additional space for additional buses, and this would also create more space for our operations. So something like facilities and buildings and grounds equipment, because again, as we grow, the need for that grows. Classroom addition at Lake. As we looked at the middle school projections, we see that we get very close to maxing out our seats. We also know that schools do not operate at peak efficiency when they're at their max population. So we know that that could be a consideration to prioritize construction of seats, primarily at Lake in this case, because we know trailing Oltman, which is by far and away the fastest growing, Lake is closely second behind. And then land, no more land is being made, and so this would purchase land preemptively for future use, or even potentially for use of one of these other items that we've listed here today. Also in other priorities, elementary school bathrooms. Our 60 schools, with the exception of Woodbury Elementary School, and when I talk our 60 schools, we're talking Crestview, Hillside, Pullman, Pine Hill, and Royal Oaks, have one set of bathrooms that serve the entire school. Now there are exceptions, as far as like our kindergarten rooms do have bathrooms in most of them, but as far as the main set of bathrooms that serve the building for washing your hands to go to lunch, so on and so forth, they have one set that serves the whole school. So this would create an additional set of bathrooms in each one of those schools so that we would at least have 2, one serving each one of the 2 main hallways. And then high school athletics, again, that artificial turf that we kind of described before, that's multi-purpose use and be able to be used by both Phy-Ed during the day and athletics in the evening, as well as the community at large. Our alternative high school outgrew its space a long time ago. Currently, the alternative high school does not have direct access to any career and tech facilities or green space. Also, the kitchen and cafeteria are very small. So this would create an equitable alternative high school that would create kitchen, cafeteria, normal-sized gym, access to green space, proper science classrooms, and proper career and tech facilities to really provide that full high school package to our alternative high school students. We also know that we could serve more students than we are, and we right now are only limited on the space that we have to serve those students. So there are students in our schools that we could be serving with more space. Also, our transition programs continually, regularly outgrow our rental space. So we're almost annually going through and reviewing the space that we're using for our transition programs, and those are our 18 to 21-year-olds. And so that's an ongoing thing where we're constantly trying to adapt to the growth and the dynamics of that program. So this would create a dedicated space for those 2 programs to combine into one. And they are essentially one program, but just operating in 2 discrete locations right now. And then early learning, we're talking birth to age 5. We aren't just strictly talking pre-kindergarten here, we're talking that whole gamut of ages, as well as adult basic education. So this would create additional space and potentially even localized space for that program. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Christine.
All right, so now is your opportunity for input into each of these priorities. So Dan explained each of these priorities, and so if we look at where we've placed these, based on the feedback we've gotten so far, we've placed secured entrances and enhanced safety measures at all sites in the high priority package, along with high school additions and middle school additions. So I'd like to hear from the board if anyone has any concerns with those 3 items being in that high priority package as we start. Pat?
Okay, with the middle school, since they have open seats, we could maybe think about holding off on that for 5 years.
Holding off on middle school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Sean is taking notes as you're commenting.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any other
Can we
comments?
just get what would the seat availability be across middle schools? I know that at the end of 5 years, it had 60 open seats divided by 4 schools, not a whole lot of open seats across 4. What would the open seats be, Dan?
So that is possible. We are gambling a little bit that the projections are bang on and that we wouldn't exceed that. There would be boundary changes associated then at the middle school level, as there would say if we didn't do the elementary school. So feasible, yes, but there would be a definite push of more students into particularly Cottage Grove Middle School, because that's essentially the only middle school showing any kind of residual seats available at that level for the next 5 years.
All right, any other comments about those 3 items in the high priority package? All right, so as we move down into the other priorities we have placed, I'd like to ask feedback from each of you on where you'd like to see each of those. So in the high priority package, in a secondary package, if you feel it's needed but not yet, or if you feel it's not needed at all. So let's start with the first one, elementary school additions.
Wait,
So as a school board or individually, where would you see that? In the high priority package? In a second package? Needed but not yet, or not needed at all?
Can't find it on here.
For me, the middle school, I would say we have the space. I mean, I know the boundary changes are going to be crazy, but when I look at some of the other ones, we have the space at elementary. We need to use what we have.
Okay, and you said middle school, I think, in your first, but you're talking about elementary.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Elementary school additions, yeah, we need to use the space that we,
And so where would you put elementary schools?
not now.
Not needed or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, not yet.
So for elementary school additions, I think this is the thing that's really helpful to have as a standalone question, because if we have 75% of parents telling us that, or 75% of community members telling us that boundary changes are, not changing boundaries is important, it would be very helpful to hear what is more important, not changing boundaries or $32 million, right? Because that's substantial. I mean, on the face of it, I do basically agree with Katie that we've got the space and boundary changes are terrible, and we should use what we have. Especially, well, and just to confirm, if we do shift boundaries operationally, bus costs would be roughly equivalent to what they are now, transportation costs?
No, they'd be higher.
Potentially. It depends on how disruptive we want to be really frank. If we treated elementary schools like a blank slate and we went in and we said we're going to reimagine these from scratch and understand that may be impactful to some folks that don't want to be impacted, but we looked at it, through a clear lens and said we're going to draw these boundaries the way that makes the most sense operationally, we could potentially even reduce transportation costs. Mm-hmm. But there's a disruption cost that comes with that. And so I think without involving transportation too heavily at this point and having that boundary process not begin yet, I'm talking a little bit out of turn, but I think there is some serious potential there, because right now a lot of boundaries have been drawn to follow the way they always were and impact the minimal amount of families when we've made changes. And that sometimes creates a long reach. So.
And as we go into the next kind of iteration of the plan, we'll really want to take a look, if it were to be a question 2 with additions, what would that do for the enrollment in some of the other schools? And so Dan Hines, I want to make sure that we have what that would look like in the event of successful or not, just so that we can make sure that the board understands with additions, we will have a number of schools that will be in the 300s. And then operationally, as we talk about that, does that make sense? Because that would be a result of having that as a question 2, perhaps.
So Simi, if I could just clarify what I heard you say. You would like a second question?
Yeah, so, sorry. So, in my personal opinion, I agree with Katie that this is not yet.
Not yet.
Right, in my personal priority list. But I do think this is the kind of thing where it would be really helpful to get direct community feedback. And so if there is an opportunity to do a question along these lines, you know, and we may decide that or we may decide not to do that, but that it may be helpful to just hear directly from the community what they would prefer.
Okay, so a second question, expansion or boundary changes, okay?
I feel pretty close to the same as what Simi and Katie was saying. I'm a little bit more in between the secondary in between secondary and needed, but not yet. I know that teachers, you know, express needing more elementary space, but yet we also have the community that doesn't want to pay for that, but we also have so much space in our elementary schools that currently exist. So I'm with Simi that I really think that this should be a second question, but I really think it's important that the public know exactly what that's going to be before that bond question is on there in both ways, looking at a clean slate and kind of what that expense would be, and then looking at shifting kids around with what we currently have.
Okay.
Everything's been said, but I agree. We have to use the elementary space because they don't want to pay for additions and a new school, and we don't want to close a building. So we are locked into that boundary changes. And I say we go with, you know, using this space in a sensible way, making it a clean slate and making it so that they're in neighborhoods and you're not crossing neighborhoods when you're busing, because it's hard to get drivers. And if we do the you know, filling those empty spaces and it costs us more in transportation, we're really not getting ahead either. So,
right.
And drivers are hard to find, and we may have to pay them more to get them here. So it's
can
going
you
to
tell
cost.
me what you mean, Pat, by clean slate?
Well, just starting with all the buildings and just changing all the boundaries so that they make sense. Like we're not taking kids from here and putting them over there unless there's no space here. Right, starting over with all fresh, like he mentioned, yes.
Okay. And so then did I hear you say 2 questions or not yet for elementary additions?
I say we can't do the additions
Okay.
because we have the buildings and we're not going to close anything.
So not needed?
Not needed.
Not needed, okay.
Yep, I agree with Pat on the not needed. It's not just the $32 million here. It's, as Julie's speaking about, schools that aren't running in an efficient way. There are substantial costs to that. That seems to me it's just not financially responsible to do that.
Okay,
So I would say not.
Needed, okay. Eric?
Yeah, my personal opinion is not needed as well. I think the only thing I would add in addition to what's already been said is that I think that the community needs to see a plan for what the school boundary changes will look like exactly, so people can vote accordingly if they know their student's going to be moved to another school, and just make every effort to I guess disseminate that information to the public.
Okay.
My preference is that I don't want to see a second question with this on it until I see what's in the first group, because I think there's some more things that are more important to add in that first group. And I agree there should be a second question, but with that second question, prioritize which ones it would be our top ones. And this, with the elementary, I agree with everything everyone else said, except I worry about then when they're out of, if we do boundary changes and they're out of elementary, how does that flow into the middle schools? Mm-hmm. So if we're changing boundaries, we're changing more than elementary. Mm-hmm. We're changing where they go to the middle school.
You're right, Sharon. And we'd look at all of that, the feeder system, all the way up to high school. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, everyone?
So Sharon, I'm hearing you say hold on your answer.
Yep.
All right, I think that was everyone. All right, so the next, transportation center expansion. So if you could just go through kind of like you just did, high priority, second package, not needed, or needed but not yet.
Why don't we start with Eric and then come back around?
I would say secondary package, I mean, I don't know the specifics, but I guess based on what I've heard today, it sounds like there's a need for that. The student body is going to grow. We're going to have more places for buses to be stored and worked on and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a secondary package.
All right.
I agree with secondary package for the additional reason if we do not have this and we need to contract buses, that's substantially more expensive than controlling that cost ourselves.
I also agree with the secondary package because I also think that the career tech education is a crucial part for our high schools especially, and we're going to need space for that.
That was for transportation center, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
I also have it down as a secondary package. I think it's going to kind of go alongside with the whole land purchase part.
Okay.
This is really hard for me to do it this way because I had this all planned out as like a whole, like what I wanted. So this is like really hard for me to break it down because I had like what I'd want in high priority, secondary, and whatever like combined. So I have to like figure out how to pick out because the transportation thing, it all depends on what we do. I mean, every single one of these items is dependent on how we do everything else. And so I'm jumping ahead. I'm just going to say what I want to say here. So Lake Middle School Edition, I honestly think that should be just with the middle school editions. It's a middle school edition. It's 2.6 million. So if we talk about 25 million being a dollar, it's what, a quarter? Not even 5 cents, right? Am I mathing correctly today? It's been a really long day. But I mean, so when we look at, taking that out of what we're looking for, then we're looking at, as like transportation and land. But I really need pricing on like the next step and alternative center, because I would really love to see those two things together. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing where it all comes together. If we could get land to build a transportation center and the next step pathways and the alternative learning center, I would want that as a second question. Mm-hmm. But if we can't do all that, then I think we need to figure out the things that we know we have to have, which I would say then the transportation center has to go on to needed, but not now, so that we can look at getting that space for the alternative students and the pathways, because those are the two programs that we don't have space for right now. We have space for elementary. We can, if we had to, we can make middle school work, but we have that in the high priority. So it's kind of a bundle. It's not of, I want this here. It's, I want this here if we can have this here.
Yep, I hear what you're saying.
I can't answer each one specifically. I have to answer as a package. So now you have my answer.
But what I heard you say, though, is alternative high school transition you'd like in a second question. Mm-hmm. Transportation, we'll hold on until you see what the rest of the package is.
Right. So we'd have to have the pricing on, because I'd potentially like transportation, land, the pathways and next step, and alternative learning center as a second question, if the money works.
Okay. So land, alternative high school, next step transition, and a second question.
And the bathrooms for elementary school. I can't forget those. Those I've been fighting for since I got on the board. I cannot forget those now. I have been fighting for them.
They're over here, okay.
Okay. And that's okay to go ahead. That's okay.
All right.
I just have to, otherwise my brain's gonna not. I'm gonna forget something.
I have a quick clarification question. So with the transportation, we're looking at the whole guiding change document with that as well. So if we're looking at expanding the walking distance, and not transporting as many children, isn't that going to affect our need for another transportation, a bigger transportation center?
And I'll let you answer that.
Room for the buses they have.
I know, but
It depends. I mean, if we have more students, even if we don't have enough space now. So basically, we're just trying to correct a problem we've had for the last 10 years. And we feel that things could happen if we could consolidate the operations and the transportation in the same lot. So it's all kind of a big plan. We will have a need, no matter what we do in transportation, for a place for buses and a place for administration. And at this point, like I said, we don't have enough room now. We're just trying to fill a need we've had for the last 10 years.
Right. Simi, we're still on transportation side.
Yep.
Give it all to us, too.
No, I promise. For transportation, I was going to make the same point that Dan did, that this is a long-standing need. And so I would probably place this in a secondary package as opposed to needed but not yet. And I think, like Katie said, transportation and land are part and parcel. Sorry. But they're, I don't know that those can be decoupled very easily. And I think, when you get one, you're going to get the other. But I don't know that that's enough to stick it in the highest priority package just yet.
Okay, so secondary package. Okay, Sharon?
Oh, Jesus. I think all this is one affects the other, a whole bunch of them. And I'm kind of with where Katie is, because we've been fighting for these bathrooms in some of these schools. And then, down at I would put transportation into maybe the second package, but not necessary at this time.
So secondary package.
Yeah.
Okay.
So kind of like I said, depending on the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's move to land purchase. We've already heard Katie's answer.
I'm with Katie. So you heard Katie's answer, you heard mine.
So land purchase in the secondary package.
Yes.
Okay. Simi?
Oh, gosh. I didn't realize I was
We started
starting.
at this end. We went there and then we went there.
So the land purchase, I would probably put that into a secondary package. To your point about the land may not be here in 10 years, and I realize by the time we need more land, it may be a problem for a board 10 or 20 years from now and not a problem for me specifically or us necessarily. And I also know that it's hard to ask the community to look ahead for a need that is not imminent. But I do think that, the land is only going to get more expensive and more scarce. And so I worry very much that if we do not find a way to acquire land, or I don't know, maybe there's like a fairy godmother who wants to donate land to us or something, we are going to end up being really mad at ourselves in 20 years.
Okay. Secondary package for land. Got Katie's. Melinda?
I would also put it into a secondary package. I think it's very important to be looking at that, and we want to get land before all the builders swipe it all up. And in all reality, land is very expensive, but it's something that appreciates and not depreciates. And, if we didn't need it down the road, we could always sell it and make money. So I think it's an important thing, but I don't think it's at the high priority right now. I'd put it at secondary.
I put the land purchase as a high priority.
High priority?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I put it as a secondary.
Secondary for Louise.
That's secondary for me.
Secondary for Eric. All right. All right, next. Space for Next Step Transition Program.
Priority. Oh, Eric?
Oh, she's starting back there.
For me, this would be a secondary package as well. I recognize the need for space. The only reason why it falls into a secondary package is just in my opinion, it impacts less students than the higher priority packages.
Okay.
This is the one I wish there was a 1.5. I see the need, and I also agree with Eric, the number of students is smaller number of students. On the the other side, I hate that this is one of the programs that we actually rent space. So again, from a financial standpoint, it seems in the long term, it's so much better for us to own space and control the cost. And I think that program is so important that I would like to see it rise to a 1. Yeah, somewhere in that 1, 2.
I have a question before I answer that one. Sure. Can we levy for space for special needs without voter approval? And levy for renting space for special needs?
We levy to rent
Okay,
the
so
space.
if we didn't put that in there, we'd still be able to do it with a levy.
We couldn't build with the levy, we can rent.
No, but we
with
could
levy.
rent.
Yeah, as we do now,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, so I'd put it, I would like to see it, because it wouldn't cost as much as the other things. I'd say 1, a high priority.
High priority?
Mm-hmm.
So Louise was a 1.5. Pat is a 1, high priority.
I'm at a 1 for high priority. I have a question though, Dan. How much do we spend on rental for both the Next Step and the Pathways currently?
I believe it's, between the two of them, 300,000 or so.
How much
300,000,
per year?
yeah, between the two of them.
Okay, so, I mean, it would take a little bit to catch up to that, but down the road, building and owning our own land is going to be much better off financially for the district. And my biggest reason with putting this as a high priority, Christine, is that these are high school students. I mean, we call them 18 to 21-year-olds, but these are high school students. They do not have their diplomas yet. You know, they may walk through the ceremony, but they don't get an actual diploma yet. In order to attend that program, you have to not accept a diploma. So these are high school students, and they're the most vulnerable of all of our students. And we have them off in a mall, and then we have them off in a little side room in an overcrowded area next to a hotel. I mean, they're not... It's really bad facilities for them, and I would love to see them in a safe place. These are our most vulnerable students. I'd like to see them in a safe place and in an area where they can all be together and close to getting, you know, busing for different jobs, sites, and whatnot. And I'm wondering if, you know, we can somehow, since they are high schoolers, add them and alternative learning if we can't get that whole community thing built into our high school additions, because they are all high schoolers. And, you know, we always put our alternative high school also separate when those are high schoolers also.
So I'm hearing
they
you.
should all be as important.
I'm hearing you say that it's a high priority.
Mm-hmm.
And then your comment about transition program and alternative high school potentially on land in a new building. Or did you mean addition to a high school?
I would say my first, I'd like to see them on new land altogether. But if we can't do that, I'd like to see somehow us being able to add that into the high school additions and, you know, rather than
You're not necessarily
separate.
add them onto the high schools, but what you're saying is
money
the
in.
cost
Yes,
should
add
be
the cost,
included
yes.
because they're high school students.
Exactly.
Okay. Katie, anything to add?
I'm just starting to worry that we're going to get that high priority package too high, and then it's going to fail, which is why I wanted the transportation land, Next Step, and Southwest Alternative High School as a second question, because we're at 162 million. If we hit 200 million, we're done. I mean, they talked about hostile tax environment. I mean, I'm just starting to worry that if we start adding too many of these things to that high priority package, that it won't necessarily be just what we have to have right now. And I think that was the idea of doing it this way, so that we have what we absolutely have to have and can't live without doing.
And I think for board members to know, I don't know if it was mentioned, but the questions that you're being asked right now are what we will be going out on Monday with our parent ambassador groups, all of our advisory teams. They will be weighing in on the priorities, as well as our Tuesday community meeting. where we hope a lot of people join us. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bring you back the blue charts that you saw. We're going to bring that back of what our community said about all of these individual items. So you're kind of getting the first taste, and it's without a whole lot of information or feedback from others, but we will be bringing that feedback back to you at the next board meeting. So just know that's kind of the thinking forward, how we're going to use what you're sharing right now.
So like Melinda and Louise, I think this is really, you know, like 1.5, right? I do worry that because we do not necessarily serve a ton of students in this program, it's very easy to just kick the can down the road. And that's not really, I don't know that we're doing right by those students. One of the questions I did have was that if we do, you know, say we get land and we can put an alternative learning center on it and we can put Next Step on it and we can put whatever else on it, will that land be located in an appropriate place for where Next Step and Pathways need to be? Or are we going to have to think about Next Step and Pathways in a space that is where land is maybe not necessarily available or is available at a different cost?
Right, and so because we don't have land yet, or even an idea where there's land available, that's kind of hard to answer. And we know that the location now is that they're close to retail, they're close to where they have jobs. That might not be the case, depending upon where there's land available, and we just don't know where that land is yet.
Okay.
They currently usually work either at Hy-Vee or Goodwill in Woodbury. So actually the location where the Cottage Grove one is as great as it's not. It's really a nice location. But the one in Woodbury to come here is not ideal, and it's not really close to the Goodwill either.
Right.
But this honestly would have been, this location would have been nice because of the Hy-Vee location, but.
The district service center.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree with Katie about the district service. This would be great. I don't know where you would sit then, but still.
I do want to say that one of the things as we think forward in our long-range facility and having met with our parent ambassadors last week, we were just getting ready to wrap up the meeting, and one of our parents just so honestly asked, what is Next Step? And so I think that regardless of which package, whether it's in 1.5, 2, 2.5, we really need to make sure that we communicate about what the Next Step programming is, who it serves, why it's important, what the purpose is, that we're required to do it by mandate, because I think that that is one component when we think about just overall communication about a plan that we would need to do better, regardless of where it falls.
On that, Julie, I'd be willing to bet that about 85, 90% of this public has no idea
Correct.
what it is.
Nope, and I would agree. I'm sure it's pretty higher. Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's similar to knowing that we have teachers that go into the hospitals on day 1 or day 2 of a child being born. And people forget that the scope of the work of public education is just that, going into the hospitals. You know, graduating an 85-year-old with a GED from South Washington County Schools. All of those are the continuum of service that we provide.
And Julie, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Eric said is when I was looking into the program, because I was trying to decide if I was going to have my child go there, it wasn't even on our website back then, you know, and I don't know what it's under right now. But, you know, I mean, it was hard to even find information on it. So I don't think it's something that people even really are knowledgeable on.
Sharon, did we get your answer to transition program?
And no. I'm kind of with Katie on this. I'd like to package this as one, you know, segment. And the thing, Eric said something about, you know, second package, right, Eric?
Yes.
Because of the people number of people that it serves. But if you remember, our commitment is to all students, regardless how many there are, and it's an opportunity for us to grow that program. 40 years ago, my child was in one of these programs, and it wasn't advertised, but it was a transition for these an opportunity for these kids to get a GED or whatever it is and be a part of the community. So I think, I mean, we're serving everyone, so we should look at this as, I still think it's a high priority, but as a package.
So high priority, a package meaning the package with Landon Alternative High School. Is that what you mean?
Alternative next steps and pathways,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. All right, let's go to Lake Middle School addition. High priority, second priority, not needed or not yet?
I'll go first. Not needed.
Not needed?
Not
Okay.
needed until we have, oh, wait a minute, Lake Middle, yeah, not needed.
Okay,
I agree with Pat.
not needed. Okay,
What's the projected deficit in 5 years?
within 5% of capacity.
Okay, then not needed.
Not needed.
I already said in the middle, in with the middle.
Put it in with the middle
Yeah.
school additions.
It's 5 cents.
Okay,
Yeah, and I agree with Katie. Either we put it in with the high priority package with the rest of the middle schools, or we don't do it at all.
Yeah,
Okay.
same here.
Same for Sharon. All right. All right, practice turf fields at the high schools. High priority, second, not needed, not yet.
I'll go, not needed.
Not needed.
I mean, this is just really hard for me. I know so little about this in terms of like the timing of what the needs would be and the number of students that this would serve. I realize that that's all still being worked out. So I'll say a tentative not needed.
Okay, not needed.
Okay, this is one I didn't touch on, I forgot about it. Do I think it's needed? Yes. I mean, I have a daughter in sports, and I know that we were changing games and doing whatever because there wasn't a field, but again, hostile tax environment, we gotta wait on it.
So not yet or not needed?
Not yet, because as our high schools get bigger, there's going to be more students. And let's face it, I do everything I can to get my 12-year-old off a device and outside playing a sport. So I don't want fields and things to be limited because I want all the kids to be able to play and be active. And so I think eventually it is something we need to do. I just don't think in this tax environment it rises to the top.
Okay, so not yet. Melinda?
As much as I would love one, I just think it's something that we don't need at this time.
Not yet or not needed?
Needed, but not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Not
Pat?
needed.
Not needed for Pat. Louise?
Not yet. Just doesn't rise
Not
to the
yet?
same level as everything else.
Okay.
Well, I just have 2 questions real quick. Are we talking about adding field space that is turf, or are we talking about making existing space turf that is grass?
Dan Hines, I'll let you read.
So this would take an existing natural turf field and put artificial turf over
So we're not
it.
adding space.
No, this is
Okay.
just making the space more flexible.
My other question would be long-term maintenance costs. What's the most financially responsible as far as the upfront cost of $6 million versus long-term maintenance on grass?
Yeah, so on average, these are replaced about 10 years. That's typically how often we replace ours. Some people go longer, some people go shorter, depending on how heavy they're used. But average cost of replacement is about $1 million every 10 years per field.
Okay. And I mean, these are kind of detailed questions, but I guess you'd have to compare that to the annual maintenance cost of natural grass.
Yep, exactly.
Whatever that would be. I mean, for me, it's a not needed, maybe down the road. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? So would these practice turfs would be part of like long-term facilities maintenance then?
Yeah, so if these were added, they would become part of that rotation of,
Okay.
like the stadiums are now. So this is in addition to the current stadium fields, yep.
Okay.
That was everyone? All right, next, elementary bathrooms.
I'll go first. Needed.
Needed. Pat says needed. Okay. Louise?
I agree. We need them. There's an instructional impact. There's a health impact.
So let me clarify. When you say needed, is that high priority, second package? Or just needed?
High priority.
High priority.
Yes.
High priority for Pat and Louise, okay?
I don't think these fall into the high priority package, just my personal opinion. I understand that they're needed. I believe that. I think that we have to take into consideration what the community wants right now. They're saying they want high school additions, secured entryways, and middle school additions, so they don't fall into a high priority package for me for that reason.
So secondary package?
I'd
or
call it a needed but not yet.
Needed, not yet. All right.
I would agree with Eric on that. I mean, we've been making do all this time with what we have. I do think that they are needed, but I don't think with what the taxpayers want to pay that it's high priority. Although that could be something when we're looking at a second question with adding on for the elementaries where that would be included in that.
Okay. So needed, not yet.
Remember, we're putting kids in those buildings.
Katie? Second priority? Okay.
So I think these are, this is kind of very dependent on whether or not we have a package that includes boundary shifts or not, right? So if we end up shifting elementary boundaries and then a lot more kids go into these schools with, 4 toilets, then I think the need for additional bathrooms there becomes a high priority. But if we don't, then it's not needed, or not needed yet, right? And I mean, I understand, I mean, after, my kids went to one of those schools, like I understand that they're absolutely needed from but I don't know that they're necessarily needed in terms of the financial cost.
So not needed yet unless there are boundary changes and the schools get bigger.
Yeah.
Okay. Same for Sharon? All right. Alternative high school. Space for alternative high school.
I already said mine in the package.
Secondary package with transitions and land. Okay. Katie, same for you? Simi?
I mean, depending on the cost, I think this should be a high priority. I think we have known for years that our alternative high school is under-resourced in terms of the number of students that we need to serve and we cannot serve, in terms of the facilities that those students have access to compared to the rest of our high school students. And it is a high school, it's the alternative high school, so it should be given the same, I would like to see it be treated similarly to the 3 main bigger high schools.
Okay, so high priority for alternative high school.
I have a question about alternative high school. Can it be attached to a high school or does it have to be separate? I always thought it had to be separate.
It could be attached with a
Oh, it
separate
could? Okay.
entry.
Oh, okay, all right. And can they use facilities like the career and tech in that high school?
Have shared space?
Yeah.
They could.
Okay.
I think that in talking with the staff of the alternative high school, they definitely have some thoughts on that,
Oh, I think that'd be good.
on
Yeah.
that maybe not being a good idea for kids.
Oh, not being a good idea for kids, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, didn't they, I mean, a lot of the students go there for the purpose of not wanting to
be in a small
at a
school.
big high
All right.
school.
Yeah.
So we
Yes.
want them separate.
So I wouldn't, I wouldn't
Okay.
even want them attached.
Wanted to know that answer.
Like I said, when I was talking about next step and pathways, alternative high school is also a high school, so I'd put that at high priority. If we end up with some type of secondary package, it could put that, but I place it as high priority. Yeah.
Okay, high priority for Melinda.
Going this way? I say high priority too.
High priority for
Yeah.
Pat. Luis?
Secondary package.
Secondary package for Luis.
Frankly, I'd have to really see some more data on, I guess, what our needs are. I'm not 100% familiar with what our needs are on this. I understand there's a need for it. For me, it falls into probably a needed but not yet category. I just don't think there's the
Needed, not
community.
yet.
Yeah, I just don't think there's a community drive for that right now.
So if we had more space for more people to be able to go to alternative learning high school, I know we even talked at a prior workshop meeting about even opening up for like 8th graders. If we had more space for more kids to go to this and really expanding on it, that would also leave us more space in our high schools.
Yes, yes. Ready, I think we've got everyone's answer for alternative high school. Last one, early learning space.
Can you tell us where they are now? Are they in the basement at the,
Central Park. Also Liberty Ridge Site 2 and District Program Center, and also we have some pre-K sites at several of our elementary schools, so they're kind of all over.
Okay.
Are the spaces maxed out?
Yes, they're maxed out. And so then as we look at growth of some of our elementary schools, like Liberty Ridge, we may need to take some of that space back for Liberty Ridge. So we need to find space then for the early learning programs that are there.
We don't have an idea of what the cost is for that. I don't see a cost on there.
So we're not playing smoke and mirrors with the ones that don't have cost. The issue with pricing them out is we could put 5 prices up there for each one and they'd all be right. And the reason I say that is it depends on how we put things together. So say we put them all into one facility, there's economies of scale there, right, that are going to bring the individual costs down. But if we put them, say, attached to 3 different buildings, or we take over, say, the district program center for one of these programs and just they use the total space and it's renovated. So that's why we're taking these priorities to understand where the pieces fit together, and then we can put a proper price on that package. So that's kind of why they're not listed as, the range is pretty significant between renovating existing buildings and building additions and then new construction where we're purchasing, land and everything for it too. So that's why those 3 items aren't priced.
Do we have a building that's already used for some preschool?
So we have our district program center, which shares early learning with the alternative high school. So that's one site. Liberty Ridge Site 2, which is the annex building across.
That's what I'm thinking of. Could
that
that
one
be
also
added
is early
on to?
learning. What's that?
Could that be added on to that Liberty Ridge site?
I would have to check on that one. That one's pretty maxed out, especially from a parking standpoint, because we share that site with Stepping Stones as well. And so there's quite a bit of parking in there. I'm not sure we could even accommodate more parking, even if we could build.
Okay. It's not my turn to vote.
So I'm going to have a very unpopular opinion on this one. And it goes totally against the guiding change document as well. So elementary school additions, if we did the additions and we didn't close an elementary school, but it repurposed it into a early learning center, we would solve both problems. We would no longer have all this additional elementary unused space. Yeah, somebody's out there, I know. But, I mean, when we talk about the community wanting us to use what we have, and that's the big thing, they want us to use what we have schools that are so underpopulated or so close to other schools. I mean, you can almost from one school stand and see another school. I mean, and they're all under capacity. When we talk about needing spaces for an early learning or a next step program, we have the space available. We just need to be able to utilize the space that we have.
So what is your recommendation to us, Katie?
Remember, you can't do that.
If I can do whatever, I can say whatever I want. It's not that we can necessarily do it, but I can say whatever I want. When we did this guiding change document, that was one thing that I privately said, and now I will publicly say it, that I did not want us to have on there that we cannot close an elementary school. And the reason is because it ties our hands. We look at least 2 of those items on there that we could put into an elementary school. We could put a next step transition program into an elementary school. They would have their own cafeteria. They would have their own kitchen. They would have their own gym. They would have green space outside. And let's face it, some of these kids would even maybe like a swing on the playground. I mean, my son does at 20 years old. When we talk about early learning space, we could have extra space for early learning. And that's all space that we have that won't cost us a dime to use. And then we can do additions on other elementary schools. Yes, there'd be some boundary changes because that one elementary school would be closed, but there wouldn't be huge boundary changes. So if I could say what I want to say and.
You already said it.
And exactly.
Yeah.
That would have been, it's not too late. There's no,
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed to say what I'm saying. It's my thoughts, and that's what this is about, is what our feedback is. And I think we tie our hands sometimes with what we put in these guiding change documents, and I think this is a big one that we tied our hands because it solves so much with no money.
And Katie, one thing that we've had conversations with the leadership team is, many of you remember when we did the stepping into the future, and it was every 2 years or every year, I forget exactly how we stepped into the future. But I think based off of what we heard the community say and what they expressed about the hostile tax climate, we may have to think about how do we step into the future and how do we take a step forward, making sure that the things that we can't live without, we meet those needs, and then we take a look at with those shifts or what happens now, what else do we need to do to make sure we're utilizing space. And so as you're talking, I think about perhaps the opportunity to do something like that so that we continue to monitor the space we have and use it as efficiently as we can, whether that be repurposing or reshifting boundaries, whatever that means, so that we're using the current facilities. Because at the end of the day, we get asked a lot of questions. I do when I'm out. Where's the land? What about the land? Publicly, I'm going to say every time a piece of land becomes available, which there are very few, the school district is not in a position to purchase land. And we're not in a position to purchase land until we have dollars. And that really ties our hands for the future. I'm very worried that in the future there won't be land for any other needs, and we will be forced back to exactly what Katie said, relooking at what we have, rebuilding, repurposing.
And I do want to add, just so that I don't make too many people angry here, I was not talking Newport Elementary because I will be honest, Newport is not a good location for, as we talked about, Next Step and Early Learning. We could not fit those two programs in Newport. So no way, shape, or form am I saying that I want to close Newport Elementary School.
So how much space is there in the district program center where Alternative Living High School is? If we took early childhood out of there, and is there enough space to put like Next Step pathways in there if we moved early childhood out of there and made that the big community thing for those programs?
Yep, I know, Dan, you've looked at that.
No. So we could put half of it in there, basically. And the issue with that is we're still without green space. We're still without a proper kitchen cafeteria. So we haven't really increased the equity much. We've just kind of moved the problem to a new location.
Thanks.
Christine, how many, for our current early learning spaces that are in elementaries, how many early learning spaces are in elementaries that are currently or projected to be at or over capacity?
That is a good question. I don't have the answer to that. Do either of you know that?
For the for the early learning spaces, how many classrooms are we, or how many early learning spaces are there in schools, elementary schools, that are at or projected to be near or over capacity?
So nearly every elementary school has at least one pre-K classroom in it. We have had some schools where we've actually moved pre-K sections out of the schools because they've already exceeded it. Red Rock is one that just pops into my head right away.
And Pine Hill.
In Pine Hill, yeah. And so we have that issue already where we've already had to move them out, and we try as hard as we can not to do that because we know the benefit to kids going from pre-K directly into their kindergarten class in the same building, and it's easier for parents to get them there and so on and so forth. So it's a last-ditch effort when we've already exceeded that. But yeah, Red Rock and Pine Hill already.
So there's no, it's not like there's some repository of space that could be had at these overcrowded schools?
No, not a lot,
Okay.
because we're only really talking about one classroom in most of them. And so we have schools that we have, say, excess space. Middleton, is projected to have excess space where we could add additional early learning sections to that space. But then again, we have that same issue where now we're moving them out of one building and into another. And then it becomes inefficient too from just a management standpoint to have your staff sort of spread all over. So if we were to move, say, our Birth to 2 programming and put like one room of that here and there, that's incredibly hard to manage to not have that level of staff together.
All right, so back to early learning space. We heard Katie's response.
Which way are we going?
I would say it's more of a secondary package, but could also kind of go along in that elementary school thing. You know, I mean, if the parents and the community are voting on that, yes, they want to have more money and put into elementary schools. If we're going to have built-on space, that would solve some of that early learning space as well. What about like at Central Park? Is there, since they're kind of going to be building onto there too, will we have the possibility of getting more space for early learning there?
So our Central Park footprint isn't likely to change much, just because of where we're located in the basement. There's some group room space that we're going to be gaining potentially that we would share with the city. But as far as actual instructional space, we're pretty much locked in there. How we use that space, though, will be a part of this overall plan. So as we move things around from building to building, we will have Central Park as a consideration in there too for relocating and trying to consolidate some of these things. So using the existing space differently potentially, but we're not really gaining much of it.
I mean, is it possible where the adult learners are there now, like the adult learning could move over to like the program center where ALC is, and we could have more early learning space in Central Park?
We could. That would be a community ed question, but I know the one thing that they try to do too is kind of differentiate where they have their space so that there's space for those programs in the north of the district and space for those programs in the south. And so I think probably a fear would be enrollment and participation in those programs. If we moved everything on the far southern tip of the district, that we would lose participation from a lot of people that live on the far north.
Thank you.
Okay, I say it's a high priority because we have to do it.
High priority for Pat. So Melinda, if I could just clarify, you said put it in with an elementary question, if we have an elementary question, and like a secondary package?
Yeah, because then we have more space.
Okay. Luis?
Secondary package.
Secondary package?
Yeah, this is a needed, not yet. For me, it falls into the category of let's see what the community decides in regards to elementary school additions versus school boundary changes, and then reassess after that decision is made.
So not yet? Okay.
Correct.
I agree with Eric.
Not yet? Sharon?
Yep.
Not yet. All right. Thank you for that. I know it took a long time, but it's good to get your feedback around each of those. And as Julie said, we'll be getting a lot more feedback around this, and we will bring then items back to you for further discussion. All right. We have 2 more upcoming meetings. Next one is next Tuesday, April 25th at Oltman Middle School, and then Tuesday, May 23rd at Eastridge High School. We'll be reviewing this information next week with our community. And again, anyone is invited to attend those, anyone in our community. Next steps, we're going to gather additional feedback from staff and families. We're going to present the information to you on Thursday, May 4th at our workshop meeting. A final plan will be shared with this board on Thursday, May 18th. We're going to review the final plan again on June 1st, and then ask for final approval of the plan at the June 15th school board meeting. Right, and again, that is our website where we will have all this information if you want to go back and review. Anything else? Any questions?
I just wanted to see if my mic was on.
Thank you.
Good job. Thanks. Okay, moving on to 9.0, which are action items. We have 9.1, proposed policy changes that will be presented by Superintendent Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. I am bringing forward for final approval 8 policies, 403, 404, 421, 505, 512, 519, 525, and 530. And after the first reading, there are no other adjustments that were suggested. I do want to point out policy 525, violence prevention. It was in the notes that there were 2 sections, letter A of section 2 and letter E in section 3. Those were in red, highlighted with yellow, and those were new additions. On page 4 of 5, letters R and S in that particular policy were also highlighted in red, and that highlighting in red needed to be taken off because that was also included in the MSBA That was also included in MSBA language, and so the red should have come off because it was part of that policy. That's how we denote that. So with that, I am asking for approval of the policies this evening.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the policy?
So move.
Moved by Pat.
Second.
Who said second? Second by Louise. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Okay. 9.2 is the release of probationary teachers presented by Abby Baker, Director of Human Resources.
Good evening, Van Leer, Superintendent Nielsen, members of the school board, and our student ambassador. During the 2022-2023 school year, as in past years, we have many exceptional teachers working for the school district. It is necessary to pass a resolution to terminate the teaching contracts of a number of probationary teachers. The reasons for release include student-driven scheduling, changes in enrollment, curriculum changes, union contract transfer article language, licensure issues, and performance issues. On or before April 21st, you will receive the non-renewal letters of the probationary teachers who must be released at the end of the current school year. The resolution terminates teaching contracts at the end of the 2022-2023 school year with non-renewal for the 2023-2024 school year. Administration recommends the approval of this resolution.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the resolution for non-renewing probationary teachers' contracts?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Melinda, seconded by Eric. This is a roll call. Dana?
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Abby. 9.3 is a transportation guiding change document that will be presented by Dan Pyan, our Executive Director of Finance and Operations. I got it down this time.
Resources.
Good evening again. Tonight I'm here to present for approval the guiding change document for the transportation and routing process. I'll give you just a quick reality summary. Statute says we have to transport every student that lives over 2 miles away from their school. Right now, our elementary, we transport every student that lives over 1 mile away, middle school over 1.5 miles away, and high school 2 miles away. We have about 111 full-size buses, about 20 special education buses. We can carry, the capacity on those buses is 77 on the big ones. We're trying to get drivers every day. Due to the age of the workforce, not the age, but just the demographic of the workforce and circumstances, we're losing more every year than we hire. So at this point, we are about, today, I mean, we wrote this a while ago, today we're about 15 drivers. We could use 15 more drivers to be fully staffed. We do have 6 special ed routes, morning and afternoon. The rest of our special ed routes, about 50 of them are contracted. And we currently contract 2 routes because of the driver shortage of our regular ed routes. And I don't know if it was pointed out, but just some numbers so you know. Based on the current prices that we pay the contractor for general ed routes, it costs us about $57,000 more per route to contract than to do it ourselves. We can do it ourselves for about $62,000 a year, and the rates that they're charging us now are about $120,000 a year. So with that said, we're doing 8 routes right now. It costs us about $800. But if we did 15, we fill those 15 empties with contracted routes. And we don't even know if the contractors have the drivers either. There'll be an investment of about $875,000. That's just so you know. I'm not saying whether it changes anything as far as what we decide to do, but those are the facts. With the guiding change document in your discussion at the last board meeting, we've come back with an updated guiding change document to the one you saw. And the changes are really in the unacceptable means. We've only left 2 of them on there. It would be unacceptable to create a plan that regularly denies transportation to those students who live outside the 2-mile state statute requirement. And the other one would be unacceptable not to exhaust every effort to provide transportation for students who qualify for special education transportation. We also changed one thing on the results side based on feedback of the school board. And on the results, originally we wanted to implement a radio model for fall of 2023 to determine the transportation distances. This would require change to existing district policy. That has been changed to 2024. As we looked at really basically how you measure, and you remember you're measuring for 23 different spots, right? Different schools, and you put a pin in there and you draw a circle for the distance for that school. Elementary would be 1 mile, middle school 1.5 miles, high school would be 2 miles. And then those that live inside the circle would not get transportation. Those that live outside would get transportation. We found that at this point, it would affect 1,000 students. So we're proposing to change that to the fall of 2024. Otherwise, the results are the same as you saw previously. Basically, get a plan together that could reduce 15 to 20 routes. Increase the accuracy of how we track our ridership. Clearly define what a hazard is. Review our hazards and hazards in walking areas, I should say. And have a system that's sustainable for at least the next 5 years. So with that, I ask for your approval of the revised guiding change document for the transportation routing process.
Dan, can I ask a question about the unacceptable means, the second unacceptable mean, where it says exhaust every effort? Is it necessary to use that language in it? Isn't that a state law? To have to?
Yeah, I mean, it is, but you can only do what you can do too.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just there to emphasize that we're going to make sure that we transport every special ed student that needs to be transported based on their individualized education plan. But yeah, and we can change the wording if you want, but that's, I don't remember. I'll tell you, I don't remember which one of us wrote that one.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the guiding change document?
So moved. Second.
Who said second? Louise. Okay, it was motioned by Simi and seconded by Louise. Is there any further discussion?
I do have a question, Dan. General question. What's the starting pay for the bus drivers?
Abby, you remember it's 20?
Is that on par with most other places in the state?
Based on what we looked at, and yes, I'm somewhat surprised by what some of them pay, and they're still able to get drivers. Our probationary period is only 75 days, so, and we're going into negotiations starting next month. But so really, the main thing is getting that. They used to have steps and stuff, and basically now they're down to getting to $22 right away. I think, yeah, I shouldn't quote what other people are paying in case I'm wrong, but I certainly have some research that I could put together. I don't want to say, oh, I think so-and-so is this one, but the privates that don't have benefits pay more. but they don't legally have to tell us what they pay. They're a private company. And then the public schools were basically on par with with North St. Paul and such.
Yeah, I guess the only reason why I asked, not to prolong this meeting, but I think it would be prudent of the district to at least explore the idea of a pay bump to try and attract potential drivers. I'd be willing to spend money on that. I think it's important to people to have their kids transported to school if possible. So that would be a worthwhile
and the timing
expenditure.
is good because we're going into negotiations. So,
Thank you.
I have another question. How old do you have to be a driver?
18.
18.
I believe you have to have a CDL. But
okay.
I'm not sure if the
college
CDLs
kids could do this part-time, or they're
Oh
not
yes,
allowed to
in
do it?
Winona we had many college kids that drove buses.
Okay. They can do like one shift and not the second?
Well, the way ours is set up, and it's a collective bargaining group.
Okay.
So there's contractual ways of bidding for jobs and stuff.
Okay.
But the way ours is set up, you need to bid on both an AM and a PM, or you could be an on-call or sub-driver.
Okay.
When I say AM and PM, that means
That's
morning.
the problem. Yeah, because you could get
You bid on a
college kids.
package.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if we don't bid on packages, and this is all negotiated, we're afraid we won't find enough drivers for the PM routes.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
By the way, Dan, congratulations on the additional position.
I'll take it. I'll go with that.
Adding to his job.
Yeah, adding to it, yeah. Next is 10.1, and that is our superintendent's report, and that will be given by Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. It is National After School Professionals Week coming up, the week of April 24th through the 28th. And so we take this time to recognize, appreciate, and advocate for those who work with our young people during out-of-school hours. We are joining the effort because research shows that after-school professionals make a profound difference in the lives of our young people. We want to take this opportunity to thank our Kids Club staff, our youth enrichment teams, our athletic staff, and the many individuals who have chosen careers dedicated to serving students during the valuable out-of-school time hours. I would encourage anyone who's watching or in the space here to join me in recognizing these professionals with a note of appreciation or a kind word. Next, I just wanted to update the board and community around the ACT test. Many of you are aware that we brought students in for the ACT test, and we were faced with some challenges where the test, well, let me see if I can look at the technical terms. I'm going to try to use my own words of the technical terms. First of all, working with Pearson, the testing company, and ACT, they send out test specs around the testing and what needs to be completed in order to have it set up. What we found on the morning, and other districts found the same thing, I'm looking at Christine like she has the answers back there. Other districts had the same problem, is how they asked us to set up our firewalls was incorrect. And so by the time we resolved that root cause, that issue, it was well after 10 o'clock, and we felt like it was time just to pause the testing and come back to it. And so while that was my own technical terminology for what happened with the ACT, we will be doing the district ACT testing date for students in grades 11. It has been rescheduled for next Thursday, April 27th, 2023. And as I said, we have worked with ACT. We had simulations run, so we actually had students practicing it to make sure after that problem occurred that they're actually able to get in. The new test date will be similar to April 18th, with students in grades 9, 10, and 12 having an asynchronous learning day. And again, the reason that has to occur is ACT has specific requirements around students' proximity and what else is going on in the school that day. Finally, just one last announcement about our community meeting. Next Tuesday, April 25th, 6:30 to 8 o'clock at Oatman Middle School. We are saying, please come and engage with us. And as I shared with the board, engage with us in conversation and an opportunity to prioritize as the board did this evening. And so that's what we will be asking our parent advisory groups as well as our community as we head out next week, Monday, and then Tuesday for our community meeting.
Thank you. 11.0, are our future meeting dates. We have a strategic planning session on April 27th, 2023 at 5 o'clock at the District Service Center. Board meeting on May 4th, 2023 and May 18th here at the District Service Center beginning at 6 p.m. And now we are at 12.0 and we are adjourned.